Thank you all very, very much for joining us. I am Claudia Menza, the current chair of the PEN Prison Writing Program. For those of you unfamiliar with PEN, it was founded in 1921 and is the world's oldest ongoing human rights organization and oldest literary organization. Its membership consists of novelists, poets, playwrights, essayists, publishers, and agents, and its mission is to encourage and defend free expression worldwide and to foster international literary fellowship. As part of PEN's programs, the Prison Writing Program was founded in 1971 and promotes free expression in a place where all other freedoms have been taken away, prison. Our program attempts to combat the isolation, the loneliness, and the despair of those incarcerated through the written word. And you all know the incredible number of people we have in prisons in this country, the largest prison population of any Western nation. We in the PEN Prison Writing Program believe in the restorative power of writing, and we pair inmates across the country with mentors in drama, fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, providing a place for them to express themselves freely, encouraging the use of the written word as a legitimate form of power. By opening this avenue to these inmates, we have found that not only do they discover their voices, and sometimes their very real talents, as you'll hear tonight, but that rehabilitation, both personal and social, can and does happen through writing. Our mentoring program publishes a handbook for writers in prison. You can see it on the table later. And that handbook describes, through example, the craft of writing in all genres. This handbook is free to any inmate who requests it. Lastly, we hold an annual writing contest in fiction, poetry, essay, memoir, and drama, open to all inmates across the country, and we sponsor various events like the one this evening so that the winner's work can be heard. This evening, you'll be hearing the work of some of this year's contest winners. Through the years, we've had many distinguished guests publicly read our inmates' work, and it was one of these readers who said what all of us on this committee have always known. That reader was actor Richard Gere, who said, what I realized when I read these pieces is that this is not just good prison writing, it's good writing. As a member of this committee for some 20 years, I've been in a position to also watch the extraordinary unpaid dedication of my fellow committee members, all of whom have helped this program grow and succeed. And I really would like those members of the Prison Writing Program who are here tonight to please stand up and take a well-deserved bow, please. Stand up, stand up. I'd also like to thank and introduce you. You'll be hearing from him later. PEN's director of the Prison Writing Program, Jackson Taylor. And I'd like to thank also Jakob Orsos, who is the director of PEN's World Voices Festival, and Beth Weinstein, also of the festival. They're here someplace. Where are they? Okay. The PEN Prison Writing Program survives solely through donations and grants, and we thank you for supporting us by attending this evening. We still, of course, have a budget gap. If you feel so inspired at the end of this reading to make an additional contribution as you leave, we are happy to accept any amount you wish to give. And or you can buy Doing Time, a collection of our inmate writers' winning work, which is on the table there, and a book called An American Radical by Susan Rosenberg, a member of our committee whom you'll be hearing from later. It's a fabulous book. Again, thank you for coming, and I'll turn the program over now to another invaluable committee member, Kara Benson, who did an incredible job of putting this evening together. Thank you.
If anybody needs seats, come on in. There's plenty of seats. This is the time. I'll stall. Mingling, mingle. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Claudia. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I am delighted and honored that you are all here to share in the writing with us tonight. The writing that means so much to the people who wrote it, and it means so much to all of us who receive it, and sit with the stacks and stacks and stacks of writing that comes in. When it comes in to the PEN prison writing, the PEN office, a number of things happen. There are these huge piles of desire, is what it feels like. Hear us, we're here, we're alive, we're human, honor our humanity, and we at the PEN Prison Writing Program believe that creative writing and creative expression is one of the best ways to support and facilitate someone's humanity. And I think that, I think it was Dostoevsky who said how you can judge a society is by how they treat their prisoners, and we take that to heart. But before I get into the program, bring up the readers, talk about my experience teaching in prison, I want to honor a committee member who passed away last year, Janine Vega. She meant the world to so many writers inside. I found the PEN Prison Writing Program through Janine Vega. I was, and still do, teach in a medium security correctional facility, state prison, upstate New York, Mount McGregor Correctional Facility. Some of those poets are here tonight. One will be on our program, in fact. And I saw that Janine was, and I'd been doing this, I just started doing it for 3 months as a, my practicum for my MFA. I was like, well, I've got to teach poetry somewhere to get my MFA. And suddenly there I was teaching in prison. I don't know how it happened. I woke up and I was teaching in prison. Not how some people wake up in prison, certainly, but... and it was supposed to go on for 3 months, and it went, and that was 7 years ago, and I still just keep going in every week. But so I was teaching this program, and I felt like I was I didn't know how the hell to teach a poetry class in prison. I was really scared. I was, would they think I was a fraud? Was I just some, whatever, were they gonna not like me? And I saw that Janine Vega was reading at a local venue at Cafe Lena in Saratoga Springs, and it said that she had been working with creative writing with inmates. And I said, oh, I got to go find out. I got to go pick her brain, get ideas from her. And I went and I talked to her on the break, and she said, yeah, you teach in prison? We got to talk. And that conversation continued. Actually, I talked to her within the last week of her passing. She was still, I was on the phone with her. She was indefatigable in her energy and spitfire and desire to help creative writers in prison. She got poets money. She got their words out. She brought writers in. I don't think there was a poet or a writer that she knew that didn't wind up visiting her class to perform. And she, with Hetty Jones, co-authored the Words Over Walls handbook that PEN published that teaches you how to start a creative writing workshop in prison, you or anybody who's inside, which sold out. But PEN makes it available as a free PDF online. I highly recommend you taking a look at it. And Janine said to me, because anybody who knows, or for those of you that don't know, it can be, it's incredibly dehumanizing, prison, for everyone. For the people who work there, for the people who are serving time, for the people who volunteer, for the people who are trying to help, for the people who don't care about helping. It's incredibly dehumanizing. And it gets, and just week after week, just my own little personal piece of the pie showing up and getting harassed by corrections officers. Oh, the poet's here, roses are red, and that's the cops, I'm serious. you know, why are you helping them, and blah, 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 and you know, I'd be on the phone with Janine, I'd be like, Janine, you know, I can't, and she'd be like, Kara, you just keep going in. You just keep going in. That's what you just keep going in. That's what you do. And that's what she did. Like I said, I talked to her the week before she passed, and she was still cursing Niska and Naifa and all the people. Yeah, I can't get the money. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, the world is not the same without her, and this is for you, Janine. If you guys could give her a round of applause, I would really appreciate it. So tonight's reading, I'm going to bring up the readers in just a moment. As you heard Claudia say, tonight's reading is culled from the prison writing contest that we, it was, I mean, the writing was astonishingly good this year. I mean, it's always good, but this year just seemed like knockout. It was really hard. I mean, we had some fights on the committee picking who was going to win. So, I mean, they're all, you know, pleasant fights. So I'm really excited for you to experience the writing that we've worked so hard to support. They are, for the most part, excerpts. So to see the full piece, you can find them all online at pen.org. You can see all this last year's, and there's quite an extensive archive, in fact, of all the PEN winners over the years. I highly recommend you check it out, pen.org. We also have a journal entry tonight. We have a collaboration with the Anne Frank Center. Thank you. The Anne Frank Center that sends in a copy of Anne Frank's diary and blank diaries to inmates, and the project is called Hello World, and then those journal entries come back out. And we have an entry from that program as well. So without further ado, will you welcome the readers? In no particular order, we have Tiffany Yannick, Randall Horton, Mel Williams, Hetty Jones, Emily Rabidou, Marie Ponceau, and John Paul Infante. And there's seats in the back, so come on in. And there's some seats over here. Again, I'm just stalling while everybody settles in. Okay. Okay, and here we go. Thanks.
This is a piece by Jody Serino from Hello World, the Anne Frank Diary Project. I'm supposed to be writing a simple journal, but instead I am a soul searching and finding myself. Damn, I want to cry again. What's with all of these tears? I've been locked up for 6 years without a tear shed, and here I am in my last year, and I'm becoming a crybaby. Oh my God, this is so overwhelming. I feel as if I'm trying to break free, to push loose from something. This is why I keep referring to everything as a birth. I feel nauseous again. I feel intense pressure, squeezing. It's almost hard to break. I'm overwhelmed, yet bound. We have counselors here to talk to, but I can't. Why? Because I feel they don't listen. I feel that they don't have the time to help me. I know I need help, which is why I want to cry, and now I'm angry. I'm angry because so many doctors are medicating these men and women because they don't have the time to help them by listening to them. I mean truly listening and hearing. I'm angry because so many prisoners are here because they're hurting and don't know how to get through this.
This piece is by Arvin Washington III, titled Immigrant. I am an immigrant, the child of another land. They call me African, American, but my African roots have atrophied in an Agent Orange cesspool of substandard schools and militarized zones of intransigent poverty. I, too, used to sing America as Harlem Renaissance and Negro spoke of rivers. We were cool. Native sons and invisible men fleeting meridian as our eyes watched God and Satchmo blew dizzy. Martin saw a dream, And I believed by any means necessary in the audacity of hope. And along the way, while mourning 4 little black girls shaded by the rebel of the towers, I became an American. The seed of a strange fruit buried in the dust of yesterday that fought through the concrete to blossom. Now I shine in the project courtyard amidst the litter of empty crack vials, broke spikes, and twice-used condoms. For I am an immigrant, and this is my land. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. There we go. That's fine. Thank you. This is called The Ring by Christy Buchanan. 16 years ago, in police custody, I gave birth to a baby boy. I named him Scott. My circumstances dictated my decisions, and I gave him up for adoption. There was no choice. I was facing life in prison. I was afraid to hold him or even look at him. I knew if I did, I wouldn't be able to let go. But how could I keep him? It was practically guaranteed that I would be going to prison for a very long time. His adoptive parents said if I wrote him a letter, they would be sure to give it to him when he was old enough. So I did. But that was all. There was nothing else. 48 hours after he got here, he was gone. I never laid eyes on him. One night, right before I had the baby, a friend came to see me at the jail. She gave me a tiny gold band and suggested I put it on the baby as soon as I had it. Then when it was time for him to leave, I could put it on my pinky. That way I would always have something of his. The ring fit securely just below the last joint of my left pinky finger. I thought it was a great idea. Initially, I intended to hold my child, thinking I could handle it with no problem. I was very good at shoving stuff and ignoring reality, but Scott's arrival was too huge. I think my mind cracked when I signed the adoption papers. I know my heart broke. I asked the nurse not to bring him to me. I thought it would be better that way, easier. Some of the nurses were nice to me, and some were not. I was in police custody, after all, waiting trial, waiting to go to prison. And because of this, I wasn't going to be in the hospital very long at all. Scott would be there only 2 days himself. He was hidden in the neonatal unit because of all the publicity surrounding me. One of the nice nurses agreed to put the ring on his finger and then bring it back to me when his parents came to get him. She said it fit nicely on his thumb, and there it stayed for about 37 hours. When he left the hospital, the ring was on my pinky. I wore that ring every day for the next 16 years. It never came off my finger for any reason, and I never worried about losing it either. It was just always there, part of my hand. Every time I looked at it, I thought about Scott. He was always with me. Then one night, it was just gone. Game 6 of the World Series was on, and I had been talking to C.O. yearly about the 7th inning. I had a habit of rubbing the ring with my thumb. That's why I realized it was gone. Hoping it was on my desk, I flew back to my room. Nothing. So I charged back to the spot of my conversation with Mr. Yearly. We'd been on the top tier, and I thought, oh, man, if it fell from up here, who knows where it wound up? It's so small and light, it could have collided and bounced a mile. I was trying not to panic as I ran down the stairs, but I could feel my grip slipping. Tears ran down my face as I stood there, helplessly staring at the floor, overwhelmed by how big it looked and how small the ring was. I don't remember going back upstairs or what I told my roommate. Trio and I had been roommates for a long time. She knew all about my ring. What I do remember is standing in the middle of my room, suffocating under the enormous sense of loss. I was barely aware of the edges of what was going on around me, and truthfully, I can't say I actually helped look for it. The compassion of God filled the wing that night and touched the hearts of 55 women. Word travels fast in a place like this. One of my best friends, Dorian, came upstairs and helped Trio tear our room apart. They stripped the beds, emptied the trunks, took everything out of the desks, all the while reassuring me it was going to turn up, that they were going to find it. Those sweet souls literally went through every piece of everything in that room, trying to love that ring back to my finger. That's only part of it. While Trio and Dorian were shaking down the room and I was standing still crying, more of the same was happening downstairs. Those girls crawled over every inch of the day room floor. They dumped out the trash and sifted through it. They sifted through butt cans. Mr. Yearly gave them a flashlight so they could look in the shower drains. The washers and dryers were moved. People were even checking in their rooms in case it had bounced and rolled under the doors. I hadn't dealt with giving up my son. I knew it was the right thing to do for his sake, but emotionally, I was completely incapable of dealing with it, so I didn't. Losing that tiny little ring jerked me into reality so fast, I was crushed instantly by the ugliness of it. I had messed up so bad, I couldn't keep him, but I could keep his ring. Losing it was betrayal somehow, and it devastated me. In the middle of all that chaos, someone let out a shout that was nothing shy of victorious. It tore through my despair completely. What happened next is a blur. I don't remember going downstairs or what was going on around me. I only remember Darlene standing in front of me, holding out my ring. The look on her face was wonderful, awed. People were cheering and hugging when she carefully handed it to me. It was unbelievable. All I could do was hug her tight and tell her I would always be grateful. You may think this is just a story about a piece of jewelry with sentimental value, but it's not entirely. It's also about the power that little ring held and how it brought a group of the most unlikely women together. Prisons are a world of their own, with codes and rules you'll not find in any book. The worst of the absolute worst are thrown together and forgotten. Survive or succumb. Kindness doesn't exist because people have to look out for themselves. Caring is weakness to be preyed on. Most women here are severely damaged. They come from lives of violence, drugs, and poverty. They learn to be cold and hard because that's how they survive. Not all women here stay that way, though. Doing time is damn hard. It forces you to change. And if you're even remotely honest with yourself, those changes bring out the good stuff. That's what happened that night in the lifers' wing. The good stuff came out in such a glorious way. Everyone was hugging, some were crying. It felt good, we felt good, for one shining moment because of a ring. I
guess I can handle it. Okay, the poem I'm going to read is by Spoon Jackson, titled No Moon. I was afraid this would happen the way the night looks with no moon, the way the wind whistles off the back porch. You want to love me. How can I tell you I have a life, but I don't have a life? What can I tell you? Shall I tell you about the bars that don't speak, or the razor wire that longs to sever the throat, or the cold winds that bounce off the emptiness? Shall I tell you about the trees 200 yards away across the river of electric wire, how the trees haunt me like the smell of barbecue, the scent of a mountain meadow, the sight of crimson painted toes? Across the river, across the fields, across the hills, there is wine that belongs to no one. What can I tell you? Shall I tell you about the lovely women I never had? Shall I tell you about the moon fading away like a piece of hard, round candy? I was afraid this would happen the way the night feels with no moon, the way the wind whistles off the back porch, pushing on the screen door like 10 cats, like 10 mad men fighting.
So I'm reading a beautiful poem by Robert C. Fuentes. The poem is titled The Undocumented, and it goes like this. My grandfather traveled from the times of revolution to this country to work, the land as a butterfly burro, floating, treading, and toiling across harvests of fields, through orchids of citrus, burrowing mines through stone with the dust of Mexico caked and dried on his back, and United States sweat fresh dripping from his brow. His eyes, pictures of labor. His silence, the voice of survival. His story left undocumented. And to the day he collected the paid check of his final breath.
That's just what I was going to ask him to do. I knew he was going to be bigger. This is a poem by Julia Iskowitz. And she very modestly called it Untitled. But I think it's a good choice because it is about the mind, about the event that is happening here, imagining memory. A voice that's tinted with the hint of memory. I can hear myself not say the words. I can taste the salt of the tears you would not cry. And our intentions are chalk drawn on the sidewalk. Back in the days when we lost ourselves along the cold brick walls of apartment buildings, in alleyways with garbage decorating the floor, then outside you stepped in soft mud and lifted me in the air. I can still remember the way your laughter felt, tickling through my hair.
This piece is called A Taste of Honey, and it's by James Burns. I wanted to start by saying what I really like about this piece is that it's about something so small, but so precious that those of us on the outside take for granted. It has been a long time since I had seen or tasted honey. When they shoved a tray of mush under the door one morning, I looked at the clear plastic package on my tray like Midas looked at a solid gold bar. My grandfather and father had many hives of honeybees. I used to help with the harvesting every autumn. We gathered enough honey from one harvest to last us the whole year and leave the bees plenty for the winter. It was a good partnership. There in my hand that morning was a wee package of liquid gold. I did not waste it on the bland mush. I gingerly placed one drop on my forefinger and tasted the honey as if for the first time. Honey must surely come from heaven, and the bees are fuzzy little angels, I thought. My taste buds were in pure ecstasy. A deluge of memories came rushing into my mind, memories of days when life was simpler, when I was a child growing up on a farm in the western mountains of North Carolina. But man cannot live on honey alone. So I carefully squeezed half of the honey in that small package onto my one slice of bread, careful not to spill a single drop. The other half I saved for later, knowing that a cup of hot tea will taste better with this heavenly sweetener. I don't know how long it actually took me to devour my honey and bread, but it seemed to last an eternity. Each bite was accompanied by more pleasant memories of time spent in freedom with family and friends. When I emerged from my honey-induced trance, the guards were opening the doors to retrieve my tray, and it was time to start the workday. For a moment there, I had been free. I had roamed the forests and fields of my mountain home. I had smelled the spruce, the mountain laurel, and the wildflowers. I had looked into the eyes of loved ones and heard their gentle voices. I had held my children and swung them in circles in the sunshine. I had walked through a familiar field to harvest honey with my father one more time. I knelt and prayed that the next few months until I was released would pass quickly, and also I thanked God for a taste of honey.
So me and Randall are going to read something by D. Lani Raposa. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And it's titled, what was that? And it's called Fine, Fine Day. It's in 4 parts. I'm going to read part 1 and part 2, and Randall's going to read part 3 and part 4. All right. It was too late for the avenue, so I headed downtown to the corner of Jones and Eddy. There, the sidewalk is stained with the lives of the ones who were left behind. I stood on the corner in a vacuum, just trying to catch some heat from the tailpipe of an idle taxi. I watched as the steam rose up from the sewer grates like the whole damn city was about to blow. Above the flap houses where the chicken hawks gathered to feed, violent stabs of blinking neon were competing for my attention. In the Tenderloin district of San Francisco, the vultures work right off the streets. They wade through the blood and the bone and the spit as the sirens scream through the night like the blood-curdling wails of wild banshees. The place is like Dali painting Bukowski on crack, endless shades of rage and desperation melting across an endless canvas of night. 2. The evening exploded to life like the blast from a .44 Magnum and punked the sun right out of the sky. For as long as I can remember, the true stars of the night have always remained the same: sex, drugs, and violence. They were always the main attractions. The rest of us were just walk-ons who never had the stones or the talent for the big time. We were all just 2-bit players doctoring illnesses that took years to perfect. Junkies, whores, and thieves. Pushers, pimps, and grafters. Carney-like barkers with rows of gold teeth and carnival names dripped straight from the pages of Seuss. We were all down there for the same reason, to fill a hole in the middle of our souls that nothing but the twisted or perverse seemed to fill. Heroin, crack and meth, vials and baggies, syringes and bundles, glassware and tubing, back to the wind, collars turned up, shrunk down in our coats chasing the dragon's tail across a piece of well-used foil. And to what avail? In the end, it was all for naught. Every drug, every hit, every sip was just a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, and it was only a matter of time before we all bled out. And sex? Sex was on every corner, in every storefront. Neon tubing in purples and reds, announcing the peep shows and 25-cent booths. 64 channels of grainy, low-grade porn. Just cheap cuts of commercial beef set to the wham of electric guitars. In the sex shops, the magazine racks were always overstocked. From conventional porn to the rainbow rags, it was all there just spilling into the aisles. The more perverse, the higher the price. And believe me, no matter how vile or disgusting, there was never a shortage of buyers. In the back rooms where the live nude shows were, all that separated you from some runaway teen from Ohio was a filthy piece of glass. Girls with bruised thighs and needle-tracked arms would tangle in the nude as long as the quarters kept dropping. But none of those moments of counterfeit intimacy ever really delivered. 10 minutes later, you'd be down $20 and alone as you've ever been. The violence downtown was like jazz improv, brutal shards of Montgomery and Mingus, quick hooks and broken licks punctuating the night. But as ugly as it all seemed and as sad as it all felt, the violence was a necessary evil that served a vital purpose. It created balance, order, and value in a world that lacked in all three. Without the violence, we were like random notes of those broken licks, lacking boundaries and value. Spencer, the English poet, wrote, "Death is the mother of all beauty, for it is the possibility of loss which makes all things valuable." On our little piece of the planet, violence was a disciple of death that gave structure to it all.
I was a chalk outline just waiting to happen. That's about as best as I can describe my existence then. A landscape of horror, both harsh and stark. The Tenderloin was just an outer manifestation of an inner nightmare. But there was no illusion of hope to lead me astray. What I saw was what I got, and what I got was a habit the size of the sun. Dope is a tricky gig. You have to figure out how much it takes to kill you and then back it off just a little bit. So every high is a wild crapshoot. Throw snake eyes and the jig is up. But the cold, hard truth is that dope runs can only end in one of two ways, death or detox, with nothing in between. Measured against the high, I couldn't tell you if those are good odds. On the surface, they appear to be 50-50. But with dope, nothing is ever quite what it seems, and the house always has the edge. But make no mistake about it, a drug habit is more than just doing dope. It is a commitment forged in desperate fires of misgivings. Then again, my whole damn life was nothing more than a torn and tattered canvas painted with misgivings. Looking back on the nightmare now, I can actually see the progression of destruction and work that went into building a perfect junkie. And you think I'd have seen it coming. It wasn't a Rubik's Cube of some deep Zen riddle. It was pretty straightforward, really, and my life went down like this. Anger, rage, shame, pain, fear, doubt, more than, less than, better than, worse than, rejection, dejection, despondency, and despair, bested, molested, and used and abused, scars on my wrists and my soul and my dreams, hospitals, puzzle houses, group homes, and jails, from prison to prison and place to place, from cell to cell and to cage, misfit, outcast, pariah, and rebel, a perpetual volunteer victim in and out of my own brilliant, tortured mind. And the skids with the scales, on the back streets and alleys of some rat-packed, crack-back, drug-infested hotel where the rooms feel like tombs and reek of piss and fear. In the Tenderloin, we all wore the razor sadness that only grew worse with the merciless dirge of time. We were tragic cartoon people with cartoon names who watched the world with the eyes of those who ate for just being born. Then again, there was nothing wrong with us that a fix or a sip or a hit wouldn't cure. For October 31st, 2003, Halloween. I remember that morning well. It was 5 a.m. and I was deep in the canyons of the city. Perched on the ledges of the urban buttes, a conspiracy of angels was plotting to bring me home. Their tears of unyielding compassion rained down on my washed-out soul. Over the past 3 decades, I have suffered no less than 1,000 deaths. It's those small spiritual ones that accumulate over time and eventually rip the wind from your soul. As I chipped away at my habit chipped away at me until all that was left of my life could not even feel a damn thimble. For 30 years, my friends and family watched the needle and pipe use the man until the man was finally gone. That morning, I watched as a seam of orange slowly began to pry away the relentless grip of night. That day, the smart money was on the sun. I'd hopped on the N train and rode down the Judah Street to the end of the line. I spilled onto Ocean Beach and slowly padded my way across the sand. I watched as the seagull militia began to gather. The diamonds and the pearls of Neptune were spread across the dark, wet velvet where the waters caressed the shore. I walked to the ocean's edge and rested on my haunches. As I squatted there staring out at the waves, I was struck by a thought that I carry with me to this day. It's morning, and I'm loaded and tired, but I'm blessed with another day. A lot of other junkies were not. While I was running up and down the back streets and alleys looking for another fix, other addicts passed away in the night like shooting stars on the periphery of life. Most of their prayers unanswered, most of their wounds unhealed. A lot of other fine people passed as well. Folks who have done more good in a single day than I've done in my entire life. And their passing will be mourned by others with a profound sense of sadness and loss. So who really knows the hows and the whys of this harsh, crazy, beautiful life? Why God is God and why we are us? Why are some of the most wretched souls afforded chance after chance to reconcile with life with so many of the good, when so many of the good are truly taken from us far too soon? All I know is that I was saved by grace and that somehow I needed to make my life worthy of such providence. It was a pretty tall order for a gutter junkie, but a powerful enough revelation that it has stayed with me ever since. As I stood and flipped my collar to the cold, I breathed in deeply the sweet salt air and took the first step of my journey down the avenues of my soul to seek out the angels of my better nature. For the first time in my life, I felt like the city was on my side, bound for the downtown train. I knew it was the beginning of a fine, fine day.
This piece is by Yvette M. Louiselle. I'd like to thank Miss Louiselle for writing this amazing story. It's called How to Survive in Prison, a brief history of my first 23 years at the Iowa Correction Institution for Women. 1988. Pretend you're not really in prison. 1989. Pretend you're not really in prison for life. Sleep as much as possible. 1990. Lose your grandma Lucita cancer. Try to find a better lawyer. Watch TV when you're not sleeping or writing attorneys. 1991. Celebrate turning 21. Write 10-page letters to everyone you know. Write 5-page letters to people who know people you know. Fall in love with a Marine stationed in Iraq. 1992. Wait for a court date for your first appeal. Read anything you can find. Try to get your family to visit you. 1993. Lose your appeal. Learn to circumvent, break the rules from other inmates. Let someone's girlfriend turn you out. Get beaten up by the girl's girlfriend. Live for visits from your Marine boyfriend. 1994. Find out your boyfriend gets married. Spend as much time in the yard as possible. Learn to fit in. Become someone's girlfriend. Stop thinking about the outside world. Stop thinking that being good is going to get you anywhere. 1995. Start taking college classes. Study whenever you're not with your girlfriend. Wonder why the food is suddenly getting so bad. Wonder why the officers are getting so strict. Wonder why the prison is changing so much. 1996, find out your boyfriend got divorced. Live for visits from your boyfriend again. Write 10-page letters to everyone you know again. File another appeal. 1997, say goodbye again when your boyfriend moves to California. Get a new girlfriend. Get in a lot of trouble. Go to the hole with your girlfriend. Figure out that she's bulimic. Figure out that she's cheated on you with half the prison. Figure out how to survive a broken heart in prison. 1998. Get another girlfriend who occasionally beats you up. Be happy when she calls you her wife. Go to the hole together. Leave her for someone else who doesn't beat you up. Get out of the hole. Get back with your wife. Graduate from a community college with honors. Wonder why the prison is suddenly issuing everyone a pair of recycle stained panties each morning instead of giving you your own to keep. 1999. Get a job as a tutor. Get to see your grandma Ethel who lives in Ohio. Get a girlfriend who goes by the name Football. Find out that your boyfriend is getting transferred. Live for visits from your boyfriend again. Start working on your legal case again. 2000. Say goodbye to your girlfriend and your boyfriend again. File another appeal. Turn 30. Get in a writing class. 2003. Win an award for a short story about your mom. Write your boyfriend doing his second tour in Iraq. Get a Dear Jane letter from him. Spend a lot of time in bed not sleeping. 2004. Realize that you've been in prison as long as you were free. Start forgetting what happened when. Isolate yourself. Stop writing letters. Stop getting mail. Stop making phone calls. Stop getting visits. Get 3 court dates that all get canceled. 2005. Move units again. Get a court date again. Find out your boyfriend got married again. Watch your aunt testify about your father raping your mother in front of you before you could speak. Get really, really sick right before court. Stay sick for months after. Wait for a decision on your appeal. Get another girlfriend. Go to the hole. Lose your job. Get out of the hole. Win an award for a poem. 2006. Write the judge once a week. Write your attorney once a week. Try to stop thinking about getting out. Hear that your boyfriend and his new wife had a baby. Gain 10 pounds from eating ramen noodles while studying. Get A's in your classes no matter how much effort it takes. Get 2 stories published in an anthology of prisoners' writings. Go the entire year without a girlfriend. Go the entire year without getting in trouble. Wonder if there may be a connection between these two phenomena. 2007. Lose your appeal. Hear that your boyfriend made lieutenant colonel. Throw yourself into your college classes. Walk laps outside for hours a day. Get a job in the chapel. Obsess over reorganizing the chapel library. Attend almost every church service, regardless of denomination. Meditate a lot. Become calmer. Become nicer. Learn to quilt. Start writing more. Win $200 for a poem about all the women who have died while you've been in prison. 2008. Get your prison industry's job back. 56 cents an hour. Work hard, study harder, get bored, get lonely, get another girlfriend. Stop spending time with your prison friends. Stop writing your friends on the outside. Stop worrying so much about getting visits. Study when you have time. Sleep when you have time. Write a little. Get some poems published in a literary journal. 2009. Throw yourself into being in love for what you tell yourself is the very last time. Wonder why it doesn't seem to be working. Stay up all night, every night, to get your homework done. Finally, graduate from college with high honors. Find out that the US Supreme Court is reviewing the constitutionality of giving juveniles life without parole. 2010. Stay up late at night when everyone else is asleep. Get up early because you can't sleep anyway. Hope that the juvenile life without parole law changes. Try to stay out of the hole. Write when you can stand reading your own thoughts. Think about getting out of prison every day. Think about your mom, wherever she is. Think about your brothers, wherever they are. Lose another girlfriend. Get beaten up one more time. Get another girlfriend. Wait for a visit. Wait for a letter. Wonder why the prison has started giving out used panties again. Try to think only about the next thing, whatever that may be. Try to hope. Try to breathe. Remember to breathe. Remind yourself to breathe. Pretend that you're really still alive.
Okay, this the last poem is by Nolan Gelman, and it's titled Fair Hill Prison. I am sitting here in Fair Hill Prison, watching the guards jingle by in their shiny shoes. I am okay here. I am secure. I have been classified, collated, and rated, fingerprinted, photoed, and filed. I am an examined, inspected cut of meat, dressed in naccy and set in concrete. I am sitting here in Fair Hill Prison, keeping time by the wrinkle. I have heard black men evolve English. I have seen white boys change color. I have heard Puerto Ricans jabber like music. I have met men wanting to educate, rehabilitate, humiliate, intimidate, or fornicate. I have watched me do the Thorazine shuffle, the leg shackle bunny hop, and the commissary stroll. I have seen men screw scrapple, toil rolls, and apples. I have heard young bucks brag about my gold and G-money, my Benz and Beamer, my cane and crack, my hoes and honey, while old cons sneer, young fool. I have eaten mountains of macaroni, piles of potatoes, miles of hot dogs, and all the rice in China. I have seen mint ferment peaches, plums, pears, huff, glue, sniff solvent, smoke aspirin, shoot sign off, and swallow balloons. I have played cards with kids who couldn't read but played poker like a machine. I have discovered wondrous ways to boil water. I have seen roaches pour out my vent like okies at a land rush. I have had mice maul my munchies. I have had a crazy little cat jump in my cell and lie on my lap and purr. I have looked in eyes and seen the ocean bottom, the beatific and the beast. I have smelled piss, sweat, disinfect, feet, fear, lust, and despair. I never knew so many people read the Bible. I am sitting here in Fair Hill Prison, watching a damn dumb bird fly over the fence, somewhere over the rainbow where people eat burgers, girls wear high heels, and going down don't mean lockup. I plan to land a big job out there. I swing the meanest mop in E-Block. I am another number in man's endless refinement of confinement, concentration, detention, incarceration, correction, or just plain doing time. I have killed time by the spoonful, by the book, hard time, short time, good time, time slow as blood is thick, time as a nightstick, but sure as resurrection, my day is approaching. And I'll don my $60 suit, and I'll carry my cardboard case, and I'll tote my Trailways ticket, and I'll walk out of Fair Hill Prison, and I won't look back, maybe.
Thank you very much for the readers and for the writers, and the readers who generously donated their time tonight. I'm going to ask a couple of people to come up, and we're going to talk for a few minutes about prison. And while Beth is setting up the chairs, I just want to say a few words about the committee that I feel very honored to be a part of. It's a committee that's not self-heroic, if you know what I mean by that. They're not people who say, well, aren't I wonderful? I work on prison stuff, and isn't that edgy, and isn't that neat, and isn't that fascinating, and we get to read all kinds of amazing stuff. They're people who quietly come in, they pick up their packets, they read thoughtfully and carefully hours and hours of their time. They write comments on some cards, they mail them back, and they come to meetings and they discuss the winners, and we discuss how we can do it better, how we can make a difference. It's a very small program. A few years back, we, for about a decade, enjoyed funding from the George Soros Foundation, and they funded us for 10 years, and that was the length of their, I don't know what it's called, but whatever their bylaws were, that was as long as they would fund a program like ours. And they actually funded us an extra 2 years because they liked our program so much. But we have about a budget of about $80,000 a year, and we fell short of that in drastic way overnight. And through generous individuals, through foundations that we've approached, we now only have a $12,000 deficit. So I'm very, very happy about that. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a tough program to raise money for because it's hard to go to corporate sponsorship. They get very nervous when they hear it's for prison. They don't know what that means exactly. But one of the questions that we always ask is, if people go to prison, why do they have to come out worse than when they went in? You know, if it's working, it should be rehabilitative, it should be educational, it should be helpful and useful and build a kind of citizenship. And I think we all know by its invisibility, by the way that we can't gain access and we can't always see what's happening, that's not really happening. So I'd like to bring a couple of people up who've done time, and I thought it would be interesting if we would talk to them as a group and ask questions.
We read American Radical for our class, and when I read it, I had a question because the narrative arc of it seemed to, you make the claim during the book that prisons don't reform people, but the narrative arc to me kind of showed a reform in you from your time in prison.
So we heard a little of that in some of the readings tonight too, that there was a reformative element taking place. Susan, can you talk about that, and then I'll ask you guys to talk about that and see if you witnessed that or experienced that yourself?
Sure, good question. I think when people change in prison, they're changing in spite of the prison authorities, not because of the act of being and living in prison. I'm always amazed at the depth of our belief in this myth, this American myth, that we have a rehabilitative system. Everything shows that we don't. And my experience, I was in prison when the Pell Grants, which funded higher education for prisoners, was cut. And I remember the day really well, and I worked in a library in a maximum security prison in Florida, and it was 1994. And the funding got cut. That day they shut the library. They locked the library up, put a sign on it, said closed. And they did that all over the federal prison system. So, and Pell Grants and higher education have not been restored. It's a good question. In my experience, I resisted the authorities, resisted being broken by the system every moment that I was in there. And yet, I also had all this time. And so I really tried very, very hard in every way to use that time.
Would you?
Oh, okay. So,
Right. I'll go. I would have to agree. For me, I did 15 years in the state penitentiary. Went in at the age of 17. Was just most recently released 6 days ago. Thank you. I was also recalcitrant. I was against all authority when I was in the penitentiary. And the penitentiary doesn't reform the individual. There's rules, there's guidelines, there's boundaries, there's restrictions. What the individual or the convict, as we like to call them, has the opportunity to do is either you agree to those guidelines or you go outside the box. And you cross the gun line. For me, that's basically what I had to do. I was in the maximum securities my whole entire bid until the last 4 or 5 years, and then that's when opportunity just kind of arose, and it, you seen a way out. At first, I didn't see a way out, so I lived my life as such. There's no positive reinforcement. Very little of it, and when it's implemented, it's not said. It's implied. You're supposed to, we thank you for doing that. We think, so it's no, you don't get the positive reinforcement. But the one place that I guess gave me the opportunity to move forward and grow and learn what responsibility was where Ms. Cara Benson teaches at, which is Mount McGregor. And this, unlike any other neo-plantation, as I like to call them, this place here afforded so many programs, so many volunteers that came in and gave their time to help individuals that wanted to do something different with their lives. And it was funny how we found it funny how we were so keen on trying to knock down the door to get out, and they were so eager to knock on the door and get in. So we appreciated that. I one day look forward to going back and speaking. They do have opportunities like that, but you have to be out for a little while. And I will be out forever. There's no more returning there. So with that said, there's one gentleman that was in Mount McGregor with me that always told me to remain principled in the face of the unprincipled. He also told me, don't be disturbed by the mentally disturbed. And that's basically what the prison system I know of, it consists of, a lot of mentally disturbed. And with that, thank you.
I guess, I mean, I want to concur with what everybody said. Although my path was a little different, but my experience in prison probably was the same. And just backing up a little bit, before I went to prison in, I think it was 1997. Yeah, 1997, I did 18 months and I got out, and then I went right back again. And so I was in Montgomery County in Maryland, Rockville, Maryland. And I went to this program. So I went to this program called Jail Addiction Services. And there was this counselor there who I used to have to write. We used to have to write these essays about the things that were going on in our lives, or things that were affecting us, and things that we couldn't necessarily normally talk about. And that was probably one of the first times that I had ever written anything down. And so after that experience, I began to, find a love of writing. But I was actually sent to prison, and then I applied for a modification of sentence. So by me having been in that program, I had some people, some advocates. So I originally had about 10 years. And then so I applied for a modification of sentence and spent 5 years in. And during that time, I really rehabilitated myself as much as I could in terms of reading, just writing letters to people, anybody who would respond to me, but in terms of going and getting some kind of positive reinforcement and telling me that I can go out there and make a positive difference in society, I didn't get that. That's sort of not present. But everything else that you want to learn how to do in terms of making homemade wine, all that kind of stuff, that's really available, and you can learn that 24/7. So, so I say that to say that I did, so there were some things in place, but there wasn't enough, because I saw too many people come through and not get anything out of it. And the only thing that I was getting, I was sort of blessed and lucky enough to have a support system, which, is something totally different. Yeah, that was my experience. That was my experience. But if it hadn't been for that grounding, somewhere along the way, somebody taking the time and say, hey, you can do this, which I find interesting, because I went to that place where he's talking about years later, and I went in willingly, and I had to believe that I was going back into a place that I was trying so hard to get out of. That just was really mind-boggling. But it's interesting, to be able to go back and give that, to give that. And so I know what you're feeling when you say that. So.
Just one other point, and I'm so glad you're here. I think for the majority of people that are in, and if we think that, it's 2.4 million people are in American prisons right now, people are frozen in their worst moment. And really, the system is designed and set up in such a way that you're held in that place. And that's a very, very hard thing to live with. And I was really struck by the piece that you read, A Short History of a Life in Prison, and I found every example, every sentence that the woman wrote really accurate. And if, from my perspective, I did 16 and a half years in federal prison, and the waste that's going on with people behind the walls is really part of what the program we're involved in tries to deal with. But I think it's important to know that the system freezes you, and there's nothing really you can do to get out of that moment, whatever the act is that puts you inside, whether, you know, it's whatever it is, how serious or simple.
There's somebody in the audience tonight, Anthony Papa. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Would you be willing to come up for a moment? Because our program is 40 years old, and you go way back, and I want you to talk about what your experience with writing in prison was, and then also like to hear from you guys about what you did with writing in prison. Sorry we don't have more chairs.
No problem. How you doing all? I spent 12 years of a 15-to-life sentence at Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Austin, New York. It was a first-time nonviolent drug offender who was sentenced under the Rockefeller drug laws. Brought an envelope up from the Bronx to Mount Vernon, 4 ounces of cocaine, police sting operation, placed under arrest, 20 cops came out of nowhere. I brought the envelope up for $500, and for that $500, I did a 15-to-life sentence under the Rockefeller drug laws. So I went to Sing Sing prison. And there, I was lost, didn't really know what to do with my life. It was sort of like a living nightmare until I discovered my talent as an artist in 1988. I was sitting in my cell one night. I picked up a mirror, looked in the mirror, saw an individual who was going to spend the most productive year of his life in a cage. Picked up a canvas, painted my self-portrait, titled 15 to Life. 7.5 years later, I wound up at the Whitney Museum of American Art. Thank you. While I was in prison, I got a lot of publicity, and 2 years later, Governor George Pataki granted me executive clemency. So I literally painted my way to freedom. While I was in prison, I met Fielding Dawson, who ran this program in Sing Sing. Actually, I wrote a piece today about it in my Huffington Post blog about Fielding. You know, he was a maverick writer. He was a good friend. He treated us like a human being, because the rules in prison, especially with these writing programs, is that prison, you know, breaks it down that, you know, you really don't treat prisoners like human beings. That's bottom line. But Fielding didn't feel like that. He became a good friend to all his students, and he was a really great guy. And he taught me how to write. And it was a struggle for me because I was an artist, so it was always like, what's more powerful, the pen or the brush? And but that's how I started my my writing skills in Fielding's classes in Sing Sing prison. I came out, I actually wrote a memoir, 15 to Life, How I Painted My Way to Freedom, was published in 2004 by Feral House, and it was optioned. We're still trying to get the feature film made. Hopefully one day it'll happen. So this is a very valuable program. Writing in prison, the arts in prison, the creative urge is always there. It actually helps you transcend the experience of a prison, because prison is the most existential environment there is. And what I mean by that, there's something very mystical about living in a 6x9 cage for 15 years. So you really find out who you are. So for me, I found out I was this artist, a writer. For a lot of people, they use it as vehicles to transcend the negativity of imprisonment, to survive. Because prison is a hard place to survive. And the way you survive is you find meaning in your life. And meaning is found through the creative arts, through writing, through poetry and art. Thank you.
We're talking about when we started writing in prison. Well, I guess just to feed off of when I began to write those essays, we have to read them in this group circle. This lady named Pat Parker, we actually friends to this day. She was the first one to sort of believe in me, and when I used to write these stories, she would always come up after and say, you need to keep writing. And so I can remember when I got my time, in county, and you know, I got like 10 years, and you know, I was kind of messed up at the moment. And she called me in the office and said, whatever you do, don't stop writing. And so I took that and ran with it. And so I never forget, I went to Baltimore, on the receiving unit in Baltimore County. And you know, you're locked in 23 hours a day. And I began to work on this story called Do You See What I See? It's a fiction story. And so I took that and worked on it. And when I got to prison, I was still working to Roxbury. I was in Hagerstown, Maryland. And all of us, you know, I had this little character and this little girl in D.C. and Clifton Terrace projects. And so she had to write a poem. So I didn't know what a poem was. So I had to figure out what a poem was. I just feel like, you know, because she was smart, and I felt like poetry equated smart some kind of way. I don't know how it worked out, but you know, that's what I was working with. But I didn't know what a poem was. So I began to write these little things that I thought were poems. And then one day there was an article in the Washington Post, and did a highlight on the poet Ethelbert Miller. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Ethelbert Miller. Ethelbert Miller in Washington, D.C., and I had gone to Howard. And I was like, wow, let me write him. So I wrote him, and then he wrote me back. And I mean, and that began this long correspondence between me and him, and actually another writer, a fiction writer, Marita Golden. I'm not familiar with Marita Golden. And so, you know, so I thought, you know, I was just like, it was just interesting to be in dialogue with these writers. So Ethelbert began to sort of mentor me in prison a little bit and tell me what to read and what not to read. And I was sending my poems, and it began this interesting thing. And so when my sentence was commuted and I had to go to North Carolina for 2 years, he turned me on to this guy named Leonard Moore down there in North Carolina. The first book I ever bought was his book. And so I began to really, you know, really develop a love of language and poetry, and I went back to school and got my BA, MFA, PhD, all that kind of stuff, and just a little something. And actually, my first book was called A Definition of Place, and which was very interesting because Ethelbert was able to give him a blurb for my first book. And I felt really like that connection was coming full circle. So that's, you know, that's how I began to write. And I met Kara, I was getting my PhD at SUNY, and she invited me, and I could not go. You know what I mean? I could not go. And it turned out to be one of the best experiences of my life, meeting these guys and what she does, so.
I would have to say my writing started from watching music videos. I always thought I was a rapper. And I didn't really have any push or thrive. I didn't thrive towards poetry or anything like that. Mine was like, I wanted to be the next, you know, Biggie Smalls or somebody like that. So I started writing rap. I thought I could do pretty much anything. I tried R&B, but my voice, I wouldn't get too far with that. But when I was in the penitentiary, I've always wrote. Not poetry, but again, rhymes, and little short stories and stuff like that. And I really got into poetry really deep is when I arrived at Mount McGregor again in 2007. And this guy by the name of Sean Dalpiez, he tells me, listen, we got this poetry thing going, and you got to come meet the teacher. She's cool, and she gets a little crazy. She does the poetry without no shoes on and stuff. I said, oh, wow. All right. Now I got to find out who's this lady. So I went to the class, and it's very interesting. It was about 5 or 6 of us in this little room, and we had the agent of oppression sitting outside the door. He's all in the window, and we're going in, and it's all types of noise and racket going on in there. So I got into that, and I was fascinated by the individuals that were in there. They were able to just express themselves so freely and easily, and it was a moment to whereas you were no longer in the penitentiary. So for that hour and a half, it was like you were somewhere else and wasn't the penitentiary. So I got involved in that, but before I got involved in that, they had the Poetry Speak Out. And the Poetry Speak Out, I wasn't there when it started, but I got there shortly after. And this was a night that was just amazing. It was music, it was rehabilitation through the arts, literally. Guitar players, piano players, writers, singers, my first love rap, you know, everybody was there to express themselves through the arts. So I got involved in that, and I had the opportunity to meet a man by the name of Father Matt Conley. He was a retired president of Siena College, and he kind of said, listen, you need to do something like this. And I said, okay. So he slaps me with a book of Shakespeare. And he says, listen, I taught this for 15 years. Start at Hamlet. So, yeah. So I said, okay, I'll start at Hamlet. And he used to give me, and the more I read Shakespeare, the more I got into it, and now Shakespeare is like he's like, that's like my Bible. Yeah, it's like my Bible, literally. So I had the opportunity to meet him, and then although they didn't have the college program no longer in the state, Siena College did come back into the penitentiary, into Mount McGregor, and they offered, you know, the opportunity to educate yourself, to do something different, and that was kind of like the motivation, and we kind of like got into that. And my first class was with Kara Benson, and she was our writing English teacher / professor / poetry teacher / poetry speak out. It was just everything. And so that kind of like motivated me to do more, to get involved with the writing. And for me, I don't write good unless I see something wrong or something bad happening. So I got to turn on the news. I turn on the news, and I see something going wrong, and then that's when I could just fire off. And I'll blame everybody for it, you know. So that's where my motivation come from, and Kara and Sean Dalviez, who's also with us up there. And I met Randall one time, and I had the opportunity to meet him one time, and I was just amazed by his writing too. He's just kind of smooth, got this whole jazz feel to him, you know, southern down by the river feel. And it's kind of like, okay. So I started kind of like, they say all the great authors know how to borrow or imitate. So I try to get the, you know, brand new going every now and then. But the writing in that particular penitentiary, that prison, is awesome. And it wouldn't be available if we didn't have the Caras and those that come out and support and give up their time and teach us there's a better way. So that's basically where I started off writing, and to this day I still write. I'm more of a spoken word writer, and I did read about all the dead white poets, as we like to call them in school. There's something else. I don't know how they was writing that good that far back. So with that, that's where I was at with it. Thank you.
Susan, you want to talk a little bit? I know you have some things to say too, and you also talk about like literacy. I mean, we have, you know, college education here. We have different levels of education. What about the people who can't read or can't write in prison? How do they fare?
Not well. I just to go back to the writing, I think, Tony, what you said about transcending everything, the time. You know, there's a saying in prison, if you don't do the time does you, and it's kind of an adage, but it's true. And so I imagine being in a room for years that the size of your bathroom with only hostility around you. And so the depth to which you have to go inside and pull it out, to create, to find something good, to whether it's initially motivated by anger and then it becomes something else. It's really, it takes an incredible amount to do that. And I think that's, I found creativity in prison. Every single person had some piece somewhere in some way. And those moments of seeing that creativity for me really helped me go from day to day. And I didn't know Fielding Dawson, but I knew of him, and he knew me through people in the committee and through my family. And I started writing letters and realized when I thought, well, I'm just going to spend the rest of my life in prison. I better communicate. I better figure out how to communicate. And so I read Thomas Merton, and I read the correspondence of Thomas Merton, and it really opened my world in a really huge way. And then I started to write letters and send out missives just into the universe and into people, and begin to really see how could I breach that wall. And I think that's really part of it, right, is that we all are people, and we all have something to say, and we all have something to be. And prison really just takes that from you, tries to take that away from you. So for me, I just went from correspondence to reading poetry. I read everything I could put my hands on, and I guess Thomas Merton, and then reading Primo Levi, and really beginning to learn the literature of witness, and trying to bear witness to what was going on in then Auschwitz and in American prisons. And I really struggled against sort of making that literal or easy connection. Oh, I'm in that same kind of thing, being in the conditions that I was. But so different writers and different experiences along the way led me to really embrace writing. And then I submitted to the PEN Prison Contest, and it was the first short story I'd ever written, and I won. And then Belle Chevigné wrote me a letter about the story. And really, Belle has been a long time member of the PEN Prison Writing Committee and was the chair of it, and is the editor of this amazing book that I hope all of you will buy, that's just been reissued, called Doing Time. And to win that PEN Award and to get that kind of encouragement, being so deeply buried in a basement, just started that process for me. Thank you.
Your own book, too, is over there, and I hope people will, you know, spend a few dollars and buy your book, too, because if you want to know what it's like, if you want to see The Witness, and Anthony's book, too, is an amazing book. And if there are no other questions, I'm going to make a sort of blatant pitch, and I feel really awkward doing that in this room because this is like preaching to the converted in this room, but we are making a videotape, and people might see the videotape. And if they do, we have $12,000 we're trying to raise. And so that means it's one person with $12,000, 2 people with $6,000, 3 people with 4, 4 with 3, 12 with 1. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the panelists. Thank you to the readers. Thank all of you for coming tonight.